Thank you so much, Andrew Ray, for the $5 super chat. Again, People's Funded Institute, we literally could not do a fraction of the things we're doing without your donations that we appreciate very, very much. We know all of you are working people, exploited, and so when you can shoot some coins our way, we definitely appreciate that. Um, and just know that it's always invested in the cause for socialism. So, have you covered the arrest of the Communist Party of Great Britain Marxist-Leninist Ranjeet Brar in London for criticizing Zionism? Yes, we covered it the first day. Um, Me and Danny Shaw did a segment where we looked at the tweet that the Communist Party of Great Britain put out, that Steve Sweeney, excuse me, put out. Um, we discussed this. One of the things that I'm very disappointed on is that the Morning Star paper, the way that the paper of the other Communist Party, the older Communist Party, that seems to have unfortunately fallen down similar routes as other parties that we know. But let me see if I can find it. And I think it was Steve Sweeney who shared it. But it was a quote like condemning Hamas in a very liberal fashion. Here. Then on October 7, Hamas launched a brutal attack on Israel that has resulted in Israel's ongoing retaliatory war on Gaza. So what? You're gonna, as a communist paper, criticize the defense that a people chose as the only option that they had in order to try to free themselves from 70 years of apartheid and occupation? It's a little strange, but it's great to see that the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, is not taking that approach. So yeah, we covered it last stream, but I wanted to show the interview that George Galloway did in his The Mother of All talk shows with Ranjeet. So let's listen in.
As I said earlier, would that you could get that kind of detail if you're the victim of an actual crime in London. But Ranjeet got held for 24 hours in jail, got taken off in handcuffs. A surgeon in handcuffs. Dr. Ranjeet, tell us what happened and why.
George, it's very good to see you. Thanks for having me back on the show. Well, I went, like many people, George, to express my solidarity with the Palestinian people who, as you are covering, and many people will tell you, are suffering enormously currently since Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, when, of course, the Palestinian people fought back against their occupation, which is not new, but has been a 75-year ongoing massacre, genocide, displacement, forced transfer of the people of Palestine, which we can't go into the full history, but it's important just to say that context, because whenever you see a mainstream media interview, they always start by ignoring that context and asking everyone to condemn Hamas, condemn Palestine, condemn the fight back. I don't do that. But I went to express my solidarity and support because the Gaza, we know Gaza Strip is 2.3 million people, one of the most densely packed civilian areas on the planet. An area, of course, that's so densely packed precisely because they've already been ethnically cleansed once from their homeland of Palestine and put in that open-air prison that is Gaza. And we know that the mass military onslaught against the people of Gaza has resulted in 15,000 deaths and perhaps as many as 5,500 of those children. And I know surgeons, I know people who are working in Palestine and have worked in Palestine. We've all seen a moving testimony, a heart-rending testimony of surgeons operating on children, life after life. They're trying to save in conditions of siege. When the chief of police, the defense minister of Israel, can come on the screen, we've all seen this, and say we're dealing with human animals is what he called them. But it's okay to put them under siege conditions, to take away their water, their fuel, their electricity, their medical supplies, to bomb civilian areas. These are huge mass crimes we're witnessing. But worse, perhaps, even than the crimes of Israel, are the facilitation of those crimes we've seen by the Western mainstream politicians, which in a sense we're used to, but it's never been so starkly illustrated, I think, to the working people of Britain as it is now. And there is huge mass, a discontent, not just amongst, the ethnically Arab or Muslim population, but amongst the whole of the working class population. This is a traditional, a cause that has got huge support from Labour families in Britain, from the working class of Britain, from the white British working class, in addition to the fact that, of course, we have a very multicultural and multi-ethnic population. So I, like many, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not Palestinian, but I support justice. I'm against terror. I'm against them.
Thank you so much, Jay. They say Carlos about a copy of your book earlier. I'm guessing it's the purity fetish and the crisis of Western Marxism on Amazon. I hope you get at least some of the share of that. Probably that was about $16. Yeah, we call it Institute Midwestern Marx prices or People's prices because if you looked at like the back end of things, we're really making like maybe $3 a book, sometimes less. And like the ISBN and the making of the book, the amount of work, there's so much work that goes into it. And with the ISBNs alone, that's like $300 that we have to invest as an institute on each book. So we it's unless books sell a lot of copies, it's hardly ever that we've maybe been able to make our money back with like 3-4 of the books we've published, because of the amount of sales. But what we make from like each one is maybe a couple bucks. So thank you, though, very much for buying a copy of The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, which you can get a copy of midwesternmarx.com/books.
A murder of civilians, and really you can't call it anything but a genocide. So I went down, as I did on the 11th today. Today, it seems I've literally just been bailed. Not today, of course, it's yesterday. To express my solidarity, I set up a stall. I've got some books. We have books. My father is an author, as it happens. He's written books over a long period of time on this struggle. One, Imperialism in the Middle East. One specifically called Zionism, and it's subtitled A Racist, Anti-Semitic and Reactionary Tool of Imperialism, which is a mouthful. But really what it does is...
Perfectly labeled book. All things that he said were true. You can't have a state based on the supremacy of a people that are described as God's chosen ones and overlook the fact that that's racist as shit. Because if they're the chosen people, what does that make everyone else if not inferior? Ontologically inferior. So inferior in their very being. That's racism.
It documents the history of Zionism, how Zionism was implanted into Palestine at the time of the Balfour Declaration with the full support of Britain, precisely to use it. And this is not my words. This is the words of the first military governor that Britain installed there. In his own words, his name was Storrs, S-T-O-R-S, Storrs. He said, "I'm the first military governor of Palestine since Pontius Pilate." And he said, in his words, that Britain intended to create there in the Middle East a loyal Jewish Ulster in a sea of potentially hostile Arabism. What did he mean by that? He meant that they wanted to create a state which would help them to colonize and loot their newly conquered territories, which of course were divided up in the Sykes-Picot Agreement after the defeat of Turkey, when all of those Arab territories, including of course Iraq, were divided and fell to Britain. And so this state was created and has been committing crimes since its inception. And that's the background. And this booklet really explains that history. It also explains, amongst other things, the fact that because Zionism was an ultra-nationalist ideology which thought actually that Jews were the chosen people, it's a supremacist ideology and it's a racist ideology. But it also thought that Jews could never be accepted in Europe. And it was by no means a mainstream philosophy at the time it was being promulgated. It was a marginal philosophy, but it was of use to British imperialism, and they promoted it with the use of Theodore Herzl and others, and were ultimately successful in promoting it. Interestingly, the only minister of the war cabinet at the time of the Balfour Declaration was someone called Edwin Montagu, famous for the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms later in India, which has its own story, led to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. But he said, that this was a deeply anti-Semitic policy and he was against it. Despite that, it went forward, and it's led to a state which has constantly committed crimes, particularly from the Nakba in 1948, of occupation, of genocide, of expulsion of the native population, and really setting up an apartheid state, and is currently engaged in really mass war that can only be characterized as genocide. So this is the book. These are historical facts. Actually, the book is a collection of sources, principally of Jewish authors, academics, and even Israeli courts dealing with that, and also the Havara, the transfer agreement. So things which are historically documented facts. But what I've noted, George, and I'm sorry, there's a slight pressure of speech to get some information out, but what I've noted is that really there's a war on this information. We've seen, since the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn, the attempt to weaponize anti-Semitism to make Israel, and by extension from Israel, actually British and US imperial policy in the Middle East and elsewhere, immune from criticism. I think seeing Rishi Sunak, seeing Keir Starmer line up in support, justifying the genocide, saying there mustn't be a ceasefire, saying that Israel has a right to defend itself when it's the aggressive party in this whole history and conflict, is disgusting. So I've been...
Whenever they ask you that question, ask them, do concentration camp guards have the right to defend themselves? That's the one that Norman Finkelstein asks. Do the slave owners being killed, attacked by Nat Turner, do they have the right to defend themselves? Do the occupational French forces have the right to defend themselves in the face of the anti-colonial struggle of the Algerian people? I think most progressives look back at these events and they're like, oh, great, Nat Turner, John Brown, Algerian anti-colonial struggle, woohoo! Oh my God, look at a figure like the existentialist Albert Camus. Um, how silly of him to play the both sidesism game when it's very clear that it's an anti-colonial struggle, and that, in that context, everything that the anti-colonial forces did was justified. But a lot of those people that are able to look back and say, yeah, the oppressed were right to fight by any means necessary for their freedoms, are the ones that today want to bring so-called nuance and want to play the both sidesism game. Yes, we condemn Hamas, but we also condemn Israel. No, that sort of attempted neutrality position does not exist. It's a totally asymmetrical battle between an occupational apartheid racist genocidal force and a people literally trying to fucking survive and choosing the only means of struggle that has been afforded to them by the occupiers, which is violent resistance. Remember what Paulo Freire said. Never in the history of humanity have the oppressed been the ones that chose the weapons and violent rebellion on the basis of their own choice when there was possible alternatives on the table. When the oppressed grab the weapons, it is always a result of the fact that it has been the only route left to them to fight for freedom by the oppressors, by the colonizers, by the capitalists, by the exploiters. So don't be fooled into a position where when it happens decades ago or centuries ago, you applaud it, but when it happens in front of your eyes, you condemn it. Don't be, as Eddie would say, a hindsight anti-imperialist. A hindsight supporter of people's struggles. Be a supporter of people's struggles now. When it's difficult. When the propaganda is in full swing. When people are getting fired from their fucking jobs for speaking out against genocide. When the people are actively dying. When one kid dies every 10 minutes because of this fucking Nazi regime. Speak out now. Don't be an ally 10 years down the line when God knows how many thousands and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, hopefully not, Palestinian people have been massacred. Be an ally now. That's what we need of people. But that takes something that not a lot of people have. Not a lot of people have courage. A lot of people are very comfortable in whatever positions they might have, and they don't want to get fired. They don't want the potential future job opportunities that they might have to be soiled because they, God forbid, stood with the people against a force that was trying to eliminate them from the planet.
Been to express solidarity. I was arrested for doing nothing other than having a book expressing those truths. And really, it's those
holding
truths
a book,
which,
holding a book that you didn't even write.
Not even holding actually, but being near it on the stall. But first of all, the police were fine, and it's clear that there's clearly pressure from a political source, because the actual police who you see arresting me, they were very nice, George. They've been talking to me for an hour. They had no problem with me. We were having banter. I was talking to people. Then they were told, "I'm sorry, we have to confiscate the book," and they came to take the book. And I've got a video of that, so I'll post that later. But then they went away, and half an hour later they said, "No, we've got new orders now. We have to arrest you." And it was a slightly surreal thing because nothing had happened. Literally nothing happened. But quite clearly, we've seen Suella Braverman and David Cameron come out and try and criminalize, say that the marchers who were protesting against the genocide in Gaza are hate marchers, saying that they're anti-Semitic, saying that the police should crack down on them. It's quite evident that at some higher level there was a referral and adjudication process, and the police who had been absolutely friendly and were perfectly decent to me were suddenly ordered to go into this kind of attack mode. And it's an uncomfortable thing to have your liberty taken away, but it doesn't compare in any way to the suffering and the heroism of the Palestinian people who, through no fault of their own, have found themselves on the cutting edge, really, of imperialist onslaught in the Middle East. So really,
and have you been charged? No, of course. But have you been charged? Will this go to court?
So it's a good question. I don't know is the answer. So I've not been charged. When they arrested me, and this time they did arrest me. I've been arrested once before, also outside the Israeli embassy, precisely for a similar attack of Israel on Palestine during their Operation Cast in 2008. On that occasion, they didn't arrest me. On this occasion, they arrested me. They went through the process. They said that I was in breach of Section 5, and later added Section 18 of the Public Order Act. I didn't know really what it means. It means threatening words and behaviour. Then they said it was racially aggravated, and then later on they said it's racial, it's imagery, distributing imagery likely to cause racial hatred. And so I sat with them in an interview. I've explained to them I'm a lifelong campaigner against racism. I'm a lifelong campaigner. sorry, George, if I lost you. I'm a lifelong campaigner against racism. I'm a lifelong campaigner for equality. But what I'm here to demonstrate against are concrete crimes, which are war crimes, mass transfer of population, civilian population, siege of a civilian population, bombing of hospitals, bombing of schools, bombing of churches, bombing of mosques, genocide against the civilian population. But what's quite clear is that our government are so intent on standing in solidarity and supporting that genocide that they wish to criminalize dissent. They wish to criminalize historical facts and truth in this case. I don't know yet the full repercussions. At the moment, they bailed me. They haven't pressed any charges, but I will have to represent to a police station. Obviously, I will do so. I'm hopeful that they won't actually follow this through and that they will back down. But whatever happens, I won't accept it. I will fight it for as long as I need to, as part of the wider cause of defending the right to free speech in this country and of defending the right of all those who want to stand in solidarity with Palestine to do so. It's not really about me. It's really about the Palestinian people. And it's really about isolating the British people from the knowledge and the feeling that they are justified and have the right to express their opinions on this issue, George.
Dr. Ranjeet, we're right behind you. Well done. Thank you.
Oof. Beautifully said by Dr. Ranjeet. Hopefully, actually, I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. We're going to reach out to them, see if we can have Comrade Ranjeet on to let us know what went down and what has unfolded since at least his interview with Galloway. We previously had Jody Brar on, which I believe is his sister, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, and of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. Very brilliant leader. And we did a great interview concerning the proxy war against Russia and why the war is one in which the working class has a very clear side. So hopefully we can bring her back on at some point and also have Ranjeet on to speak about what's going on in Britain and his